The church in Sardis had a reputation for spiritual vitality, but in fact it was really just more of an image. In reality, the church was on life support and they didn't even know it. And so the message that Jesus had for that church was to wake up from their complacency about sin and to take corrective action before it was too late. The first thing he had to say to them was, don't be so clueless about sin. The city of Sardis was a strong fortress that had never been conquered by force any time in the city's history. And so just as the citizens of Sardis had become complacent about their security, likewise the church in that city had become complacent about their spiritual condition. You can read about that in chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. I know all the things you do, and that you have a reputation for being alive, but you are dead. Wake up, strengthen what little remains, for even what is left is almost dead. I find that your actions do not meet the requirements of my God. You see, this church was virtually dead, and they didn't even realize it. And Jesus calls them out for their actions. He says that their lifestyle did not measure up. And so what they needed to do was to wake up and become aware of their condition and deal with it before it was too late. And likewise, we can allow the sins of the culture around us to creep into our lives and into our churches. And so we just kind of gradually absorb the violence, the greed, the sexual ethics, the untruthfulness of the society around us until it becomes just kind of normal and we don't even notice it. But when that happens, it reveals that we don't understand that Jesus is serious about sin. Jesus' stern warning toward this church tells us what God really thinks about sin. You see, he was willing to deal swiftly and decisively with their sin if they didn't do something about it. Take a look at verse 3. If you don't wake up, I will come to you suddenly as unexpected as a thief. We might get complacent about sin, but Jesus never does. He never will. And so we should not look at his grace or his patience and confuse that with apathy on his part towards sin. Jesus hates sin, and he does so because it brings death into our lives, as we saw in verse 2. We should adopt the same attitude towards sin that he has. And so this message of Jesus to this church tells us then to always be vigilant about sin. So the fortress of Sardis was never ever conquered by a direct attack. The 2 times that it fell in its history, it was conquered by stealth. The citizens of the city had become so secure in their fortress that they let their guard down and enemies crept in. Well, in a similar manner, if we don't see sin as an immediate threat, then it's easy to just drift away from God and we stop doing the things that maintain our spiritual vitality. Recognizing that human trait, that tendency, then Jesus calls us to a lifestyle of constant, continual renewal. Look at verse 3. Go back to what you heard and believed at first, hold to it firmly, repent and turn to me again. What he's saying here is that the Christian life should involve continually turning back to God. Don't wait until it's almost too late or until there's almost nothing left, but make it a habit daily and even throughout the day as often as is needed to wake up and to evaluate yourself. And when you become aware of even the slightest disobedience, repent or turn from it and go back to what you know is right. Now that may seem like a battle, but I want you to understand that the battle against sin is always worth it. In Sardis, there were some Christians who had not allowed sin to creep into their life, and to them, Jesus promises this reward in verses 4 and 5. Yet there are some in the church in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes with evil. They will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. All who are victorious will be clothed in white. I will never erase their names from the book of life, but I will announce before my Father and his angels that they are mine. It says that those who don't let sin creep in will walk with Jesus. It will be apparent to everybody that they belong to him, and they'll be celebrated before God and his angels. Now, back in verse 1, it reminds us that Jesus has the sevenfold Spirit of God. And that's included as an encouragement to show us that Jesus has the power to enable us to live lives that honor Him. By the Spirit's power, we can be aware of sin when it creeps into our lives, and we can live a life of continual renewal and continually returning to God.